Welcome to the Rev Engine podcast, where we help B2B CEOs and revenue leaders get clarity on how to align sales and marketing, build a high-performing revenue engine, and accelerate revenue growth for their organizations. I'm your host, Jeff Davis, author of award-winning book Create Togetherness and founder of Rev Engine. Hey, it's Jeff Davis, everybody, with another episode of the Rev Engine podcast, where we help B2B CEOs and revenue leaders align sales and marketing, transform the revenue engine, and accelerate revenue growth. I am, again, excited to have another great guest who I think is going to give us a really great perspective on what the future of B2B marketing is and looks like. It's Joel Harrison from B2B Marketer. He is the editor-in-chief of B2B Marketing. And then he also, more recently, is the leader of the Propolis community, which is a community intelligence platform for B2B marketers. And I hope that we'll have some time to kind of dive into that and the really unique things that I think they're doing and building out as a community. I met Joel probably, several years ago. Well, I had the opportunity to contribute to some of their publications and been featured on my perspective on aligning sales and marketing. No surprise to anybody. And we've just maintained a great relationship. I love the work that they do. And I love the fact that they're focused on helping B2B marketers elevate their game. So without further ado, I want to get out of the way, as I always say, and let Joel kind of give a perspective of his background, how he got here. And then we will jump into the conversation. Joel, all yours.
Hey, Jeff. Thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to be here and great to catch up with you again.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for being on the show.
And so just a bit of background about me. So I'm editor-in-chief of B2B Marketing. We were until beginning of last year. We were centered around a magazine, but lots changed, right? We're in a post-magazine, post-print age these days, increasingly. And one of the things our lockdown project, our COVID project, was to launch a community, which we call Propolis. You can call it Propolis. You can call it Propolis. It's up to you. It's however you want to define it. It's a closed community. I mean, we're talking before the show. People sometimes call it the dark web or dark social or something like that. But it's a closed, exclusive community for B2B marketers, for expert B2B marketers or passionate B2B marketers who want to learn, who want to get better, who want to be more successful in their jobs, where they can come together, consume fantastic content, and also learn from experts and topic experts, and in their various fields. Get access to case studies from our awards programs, get access to live events, best practice briefings and training and things like that. And get recordings from all our conferences. So loads of stuff going on in there. And it's a fascinating journey I think it's a fascinating journey we've been on. It's part of how media is changing and how information consumption is changing. And we wanted to, we recognize that magazines are wonderful. And as a trained magazine editor journalist, I love producing print, but actually it wasn't where the world was today in terms of people's information consumption patterns. They want to get stuff immediately. They want to ask questions and get honest answers, because there's lots of people who want to give you an answer and essentially trying to sell you something. We want to be able to allow people to discuss things in a space where it was safe and where they'd be able to be candid and get real, genuine responses and insights that are going to really help them make better decisions about their marketing and understand how marketing and business generally, because let's face it, B2B marketing and business are integrally linked in so many ways, is evolving and what to do to be a better marketer in the future. So, yeah, we're doing that for almost 2 years now. It's going very well so far.
Yeah, I love it. And since we're on the topic and you brought it up, I know it's a closed community. Is it open to new members? How would somebody reach out to you to get access? Might as well cover that now that we're talking about it.
Yeah, no, great. And thank you for letting me talk about it. It's so because that's our membership is our revenue, we charge for a membership. And so you can buy membership for your marketing team. Agencies and vendors we are preparing to open that to agencies and vendors very, very soon. But we obviously, for reasons I specified earlier on, we need to be very careful about how we bring them in and be careful around the permissions around that. So yes, it is open. We'd love to, if you want to talk about it and you're a client-side marketer, please get in contact with me on social. I'd love to talk to you more about it and get you involved. And it's a fantastic place to learn how to be a better marketer.
I love that. So for those listening, we'll make sure that we get Joel's information at the end of the episode, which means you have to stay and listen for the rest of this episode to make sure that we give you the opportunity to join. I think they're doing some really, really cool stuff. And again, I love the fact that it is really practitioner focused and also creating connections with other marketers that are going through similar things in a very non sort of committal, but really all in the spirit of helping each other way. So we'll make sure we get Joel's information at the back end of that and how you can sign up for that, because I think they're doing some really great things. So my first question for you, because I always look at you as kind of like, I guess, the oracle of B2B marketing. I think I just created that. So I'm going to go with it. What are the trends you're seeing in 2023 for B2B marketing? How are things changing, shifting? What are some of those key themes that you're thinking, or that you're seeing, I should say, that marketing leaders and maybe even revenue leaders should be thinking about?
Well, so first of all, thank you for the kind of accolade. I'll put that on my LinkedIn profile if that's okay. Jeff says it must be true. But yeah, it's a really fascinating time.
Thank you.
And you know what? It's a reflected glory, right? It works for everybody. It's a really fascinating time for B2B marketing right now. And there's lots of changes happening at the moment, like in kind of currently, very immediately. And there is also some bigger shifts going on. I mean, that's always the case, but I think we did some work on this earlier in the year, and I think it's really acute right now. I think we're going through another kind of a fourth big wave of change in B2B. And then this is all, and it's not so much playing out now, but it's things around Web 3.0, it's things around e-commerce, it's all those kind of the metaverse, and NFTs and all those kind of things. They're not quite with us yet. They're happening in consumer land much more, but we're going to start to see them in the future, and we'll start to see them play out. And I think the challenge around things like that is fascinating, because marketers have got to see what's going on, not make any hasty decisions to invest in things which are a bit maybe premature, but evaluate how it's developing, because the use cases are not quite there yet, and they're coming through. So I think this is the kind of fourth wave of evolution in B2B marketing. But I think more immediately, what we're seeing now is some really pressing things which have been accelerated. Obviously, you've got some economic headwinds to deal with, and that's creating some challenges. But beyond that, I think COVID's been fascinating in terms of the lingering, enduring effects that's had in terms of what marketing looks like and how to be a better marketer. And I think that they come at really, from my perspective, there's two aspects to that. One is from the internal marketing point of view, and the other one is the buyer point of view, how buyers are behaving and what they're doing differently. We all got used to different ways of engaging through COVID, and being more self-sufficient. There was this. I think we're on this continuing this journey where B2B buyers are getting used to doing more of that, being more self-driven, and doing more of that discussion themselves. And I remember 10 years ago when I think it was Gartner or CB, I think about the same time they came out with the same stat, which showed that most B2B buyers only put their hand up when they're 2/3 of the way through the buyer journey. And it was a bit of a wow moment. I think Gartner then said it was like 80%. And I think it's it's only accelerating. There's more and more kind of buyer behavior that's happening before, covertly, where you don't know it's happening, and not explicitly. And that means that there's a shift in balance between marketing and sales is ongoing. And it also means that marketing has got to not only be more responsible for more of that journey, but they've also got to raise their game in terms of the activities that they're doing. You're seeing, you're not fully into the realms of e-commerce, although terrifyingly you can buy things like, a JCB, which is like a Caterpillar road digger. You can pretty much spec that out online and buy it, which is terrifying for me, because I've got a 5-year-old son who's obsessed with diggers, right? So if he ever found the link on the web where he could do that, I would be in so much trouble, because he could probably wind up buying a fleet of, road vehicles for me.
Can you imagine that showing up at your house?
You can. There's that. I don't think there's an Adobe commercial from a few years back where the guy. Do you remember where there was the guy in the encyclopedia press thought that they were all suddenly getting all these orders coming through, and they started printing paper, and then he found it was.
I actually do.
You've seen that one, yeah. So it would be the same as that, except the parking outside my house would be more challenging. So there's this big shift. So, we're not there towards e-commerce, but so much more of the journey is being driven themselves. That does include communities and dark social, where there's these conversations going on, but it includes all aspects of all the way down the line, and marketing's got to be able to enable that. So that's how the buyer is changing. And this is a long-term shift, but it's gone up a gear. That's increasingly, it means that marketing, what they do is changing and shifting, but also we're seeing this kind of, consequently, and we'll talk about this later, Jeff, sales' role shifts again as well. And you're seeing the sales enablement platforms, content platforms kind of stalling a bit in terms of their revenue and their growth and development, because people are less able to go and have those meetings. So it's much more, sales input is shifting further and further down towards the bottom of the funnel, and marketing and sales have got to reevaluate the way they engage. And that's fascinating and it's exciting, but it affects all the way down the line. The kind of role of chatbots and the kind of the removal of forms from websites is happening wholesale. It was something we talked about in a kind of a speculative fashion just a few years ago, but we're finding it more and more. And it's kind of invigorating and it's freeing for buyers, but at the same time, it creates big challenges for marketers and organizations to know how to adjust to that.
Yeah, these are all really interesting themes. The two in specific that kind of perked my interest when you talk about like kind of Web3 and that sort of thing. Do you see the time frame from our B2C counterparts implementing technology to when it is, I would say, relevant to B2B? Is that time frame shortening? Because I think stereotypically, right, we've seen things in B2C, I should say, and then we have enough time to kind of prove it out and see how it works. And then they're usually many years later, it's applicable in B2B. And then, those innovators in the space will play with it and that sort of thing. But have you seen that time frame crunch, I guess, is really probably the best way to ask it.
I think it's just such a fundamentally bit different way of doing business. I mean, one of the things that occurred to me about this, the more I've learned about this, the more this has seemed apparent, is that if you talk about an isolated aspect of Web3, talk about something like NFTs, it's about building a business case, right? It's about understanding what that looks like. And that does take time. And there aren't very many examples that I know of this working in B2B. I think the ones that seem to be leading the way, or at least doing the most explicit trials of people are some of the publishers and information providers, ironically, but there's not enough groundswell of evidence there. I think stuff like the metaverse itself again is very confusing, and I think it's going to, and there's a lot of misinformation around there. I think that at a macro level, stuff like blockchain requires such a profound shift in how companies operate and how they actually they're structured and how they engage with their customers, that it's very hard for marketing at a tactical level to deploy them as tactics, right? Because it's too profound, it's too big a shift. Something like NFTs, you could have a kind of campaign, but it does tend to be quite orientated around. It's not a one, and you can't just do it for 6 months and then forget it again. It's got to be quite baked into your business model. A metaverse again is a massive commitment. So I don't think it's particularly shortening. There's a lot of hype and a lot of a lot of snake oil is a technical term I think Americans use out there, but I don't think we
do use that,
and it's a very apt expression in this instance. But we can't. So I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. But soon is a relative term, and I think it's going to creep up on us really fast, and we've got to just keep an eye on what's going on. And the good thing about Web 3.30 is that, particularly at CMO level, CMOs really want to get involved in that strategic, structural conversation about marketing, and
right.
There's a sense of, if you can demonstrate the profoundness of something of the change, that is a catalyst to action. It's a spur to action, and it may allow marketing to have a conversation that it wasn't able to have in other terms, unless you can demonstrate, what's happening in the longer term and why marketing is the best placed function to lead on that.
The other theme you brought out, I think that's also worth some conversation as well, is and I've heard a lot more about this recently as well. It's like dark web, dark social, private communities, where people are having conversations out of the sphere of the organization, the marketing team, et cetera. Share a little bit with us of like how, I think there's two things, how that is rising and what that looks like. And then secondly, how can marketers influence that conversation or add value to that conversation so that it can be a part of kind of their strategic go-to-market strategy?
It's a fascinating subject, and it's, there's a general growing, and there's some great evidence recently from one of the vendors, I forget which data, but I can share that afterwards. It's a really great stat showing the growing level of cynicism that buyers have about corporate content, because they know it lacks objectivity, and they know why it's been created. I remember when the term content marketing was first coined, and it seemed revolutionary, but at the same time, it's kind of obvious what it always was. But everyone's so good at it these days, and so great at sharing it, that it becomes a bit of a content wash, and it's very easy to. People are skeptical that you're going to get the right answers, even though this content is great. You're going to get the right answers from a lot of this material that's available. What they increasingly want is that more candid, less filtered, and more honest insight from people in the know. And even if they haven't actually got the answer, at least they're able to better define the problem. And that's always been the case, but I think it's becoming more and more acute. And so places where people can have those candid conversations are increasingly valuable. There are lots of iterations of those. Our iteration of that is Propolis, our community. But there are lots of ways they're doing that's happening, and obviously in different markets it looks like different things, and different professionals have different proclivities and willingness to share and a candid level. So, but to the second part of your question, which, correct me if I'm wrong, was about how can marketers engage with that. I mean, I think there's the key thing. There's lots of ways you can do that. I think the best possible way is to focus on advocacy. To really take your customers on that, and on that full journey of not only renewal, but what does it take to get them to be an advocate? What does advocacy look like for you? And what behaviors do you want to catalyze for those people? Because if those people are all signed up and saying, yeah, I believe in XYZ Inc. is fantastic and fundamental to my business, you want them to be able to talk about that and have a mechanism to do that, and to be a referral engine for you, albeit passively rather than actively. So your customers are your best asset because they are authentic. They will say what's true. So that's the best way. And I don't think content marketing becomes irrelevant, because it's still, the best content will get seeded into those communities. But you want to do that. You also need to be talking to influencers, because often they'll be involved in these communities as well. And I think also at a deeper level, there are, just as with Propolis, there are opportunities to be commercially partnered with those organizations. So you're able to get inside the tent, inside the room, and to be involved. And that doesn't mean that you then have a license to start overtly selling to everybody. You still have to behave in the right way and seek to add value to that conversation. But you're inside the tent rather than outside of it. And I think that's a general point really around the style and management of the way that brands engage across social media. You just need to be helping. It's Jay Bauer said years ago, stop selling, start helping. It's never been more true. But perhaps what's different now is the place where you're helping, and then the nature of the help. It becomes really deep and really peer to peer.
And this is really closely related to some of the recent information, or I should say, insights that Forrester came out with, I think, a couple weeks ago. So they came out with a report. They kind of talked about like 2023 predictions, and I always love reading through this stuff to kind of see what's coming next. And so I'll read the quote that they had, because I thought it was really interesting. So in it, one of the kind of bullet points was they said that 3 times as many CMOs will make customer health a top priority. And so kind of the information behind that was, they said, in light of economic uncertainty, B2B organizations will strive to grow in the places they know and the places they understand. As a result, B2B growth strategies will tilt heavily toward retention, cross-sell, and upsell revenues. And so why I think this is related to what we were just talking about is there seems like it makes sense for a marketing organization to, I would say, increase or really double down on either customer marketing or influencer marketing to really build strong advocacy within current customers, because to your point, they're probably in these closed communities, as well as influencers, people that are looking to their peers or those that are respected in the industry, versus just going out and trying to make noise with content and coming from the organization, so to say. So I wanted to get your thoughts on, do you agree with that? Because those are kind of, I think that customer marketing piece is related to what Forrester is saying about like this doubling down on this idea of customer health and really making sure every customer is, delighted and happy and understands and can speak for you. So I wanted to get your feedback on that.
I think it's totally logical prediction for Forrester to make, and I wouldn't argue it for a second. I think it's absolutely right. When the economic headwinds are stronger, people will then seek to maximize the relationships they've got. And not lose any of those. So that makes perfect sense. But the same, and to your point, I agree with that as well. The same focus on that relationship, the same optimization of that relationship can only help you optimize those new business opportunities that do exist, and there will continue to be lots of them. So it seems like a sensible, it's logical, it's sensible, and I think if it makes marketers do what they should have been doing anyway, which, they should have been doing anyway, then it's a good thing.
Yeah. No, I think there may be an opportunity, and obviously it depends on the industry and the organization. But if you're really seeing stagnant growth across the entire industry, where just buyers are just not buying because of uncertainty, reduction in spend, et cetera, I think, it might be logical for you to shift some of those dollars from solely focusing on net new logos to really deepening relationships because, we've seen this time and time again. When things get really crazy and you are able to rely on those relationships you built when things are good, you just have a better chance of weathering that storm. You have a better chance of keeping that customer. And so, I think we sometimes miss sight of customer relationships when things are good because we're so focused on net new logos and getting new business. And I'm not saying that's not important, but I think, more than anything right now, as we kind of get through this time of uncertainty, you have got to double down on your relationships with customers and influencers if you haven't been doing so before.
100% agree. Absolutely. The value of those loyal customers is not just in the revenue they derive, which of course is vital, but it's also just in the potential they have of being of advocacy for you and the reach and the resonance they will have. So yeah, definitely.
The other thing that Forrester talked about, which I think is a little bit more contentious, so I want to get your thoughts on this one. They say the number of demand teams reporting into sales will jump by 20%. And so kind of the context they give behind this one, because I really had to read this a couple of times to see kind of what this was and what I thought about it. It says, as B2B organizations up their focus on existing customers, which we just talked about, the need for sales and marketing to enhance alignment across all stages of the customer lifecycle will take center stage. And so what they argue is, which I think is very interesting, this is so my wheelhouse, instead of actually tackling the problem head on and really having sales and marketing sit down and have a strategic conversation, they're just going to try different models of putting, demand teams over here, reporting to sales and try to see how that goes. So I wanted to get your thoughts on, have you seen similar things from your work, and what are your thoughts about this approach? Because I think it's fascinating.
I haven't really seen that a great deal, but I do take your point. If that's what's going on, it does. I don't know if this is an expression which crosses the pond, but rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, right? It's kind of like,
yes,
it's like a window dressing or just trying to shift the problem somewhere else and make it go away. But it doesn't seem like it's addressing the crux of what's going on.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think this is interesting, and I'll pay attention to this because when I read this, to be honest with you, I just thought this was very interesting. So we'll see how this plays out. And Forrester even shared that they kind of went back and forth on this one and have seen kind of arguments for both sides of the fence. So it'll be interesting to see how organizations kind of react to this. And I always have been a proponent of just sitting down and actually aligning sales and marketing versus just, to your point, rearranging the chairs if we're going to all drown anyway.
Yeah.
It's not really helping us.
I think that's right. I mean, there's some fundamentals that need to be resolved, don't there? There is a probably, the Forest, if they say something like that, they won't have done it without having some evidence for it, right? Because they're not stupid people by any means. But it does seem there's a kind of ongoing tinkering of the kind of relationship between different parts of the sales and marketing hierarchy, and maybe it's an experiment that needs to happen, if nothing else, than to prove it didn't work. Maybe we'll see what they say next year. Yeah,
we'll see. I definitely will keep an eye on this one, and maybe we'll share the link to the blog and the show notes, because I think for marketing leaders especially, this is some interesting stuff that maybe they want to follow up on. The other thing that came up to me as I was kind of thinking through our conversation, which I think is also very timely, marketing always has to prove and show ROI, which we know sometimes can be frustrating and difficult depending on the tactic and the strategy, et cetera, et cetera. I think as we kind of go into this turbulent time, which we all know, senior leadership, CEOs are going to be even probably more explicit about, why are we doing this? What is the ROI? How is it driving revenue, as they kind of get pressure to make sure the organization stays afloat and continues to grow, even though things are kind of sideways. So I wanted to see your thoughts. And I know we kind of talked before we hit record, so to say, about some conversation you guys have had internally with the Propolis community on what are the ways marketing leaders are looking at showing ROI, showing marketing campaign effectiveness. Has it shifted? Is it the same as always? Just wanted to kind of get some ideas from you on, those that are listening, how they can really show their value to the organization.
Well, so it's a great question. It's a perennial in marketing in B2B, right? We've the lack of value in B2B, it's a lack of appreciation possibly, has always been its biggest challenge. And within Propolis, we have an initiative which is we call a swarm, and the reason for that, just to give you a bit of background, this might seem like a strange name for it, but Propolis.
Yes, we need to talk about this because I didn't want you to tell me before you hit record, because I was really interested, but I was like, let's just wait till we actually hit record to tell us the backstory.
Okay, so we have to go backwards to go forwards, right? So hold the thought around the question. But the reason of the name, what does the name mean? It's a Greek word. So we haven't just invented it, right? It does exist. And pro means first and polis means city. So it means first city. So, which is quite nice because it's a community. But additionally, if you Google propolis or even propolis, whichever one you want to Google, it's spelled the same way, what you will get is, oh, what's this bee stuff you got here? And propolis is the word for the resin that bees use to build their hives. Right. And actually, bees live in a community. They're very collaborative. They work together. They're a wonderful metaphor for harmonious existence. And obviously bees start with the letter B. So it's B2B. So it kind of functions on multiple levels. In a previous iteration of Propolis, we had something called hives, which is rooms where people collaborate. We've slightly changed that now, but we have persisted with this thing called a swarm, which is actually, we've worked on with some senior marketers from very large global brands. I won't mention their names. I think it would be inappropriate, but it's based on the kind of Jam or Scrum methodology. And the idea is for the community to come together to answer a specific point. And the one we did in the autumn, just gone, we discussed with the community what questions you want to answer. And the question they wanted to look at was exactly that. How do you demonstrate the value of marketing to your organization? And we didn't talk about just ROI. We talked about the value of marketing at a general level, because we didn't want it to be too campaign or program focused. We wanted to be looking at marketing, across a macro level. And so we ran a series of initiatives. We ran kickoff sessions. We ran ongoing conversations, fragmented a different conversation, took at different aspects of it. We had workshops, and where we came together at the end was with a model or a framework to express this. And I hope I can show this with you later on, but share this with you later on. But we pulled this down to, and we had one of our marketing practitioner experts kind of develop this into 4 areas of that you need to focus on in order to demonstrate the impact and the value of marketing. And in the short and very important, all of these were across short and long term. You can't do, if you think about either short or long term, you're missing the picture. So the 4 areas really are: one is revenue evidence, the second one is brand evidence, third one is customer evidence, and the fourth one is engagement evidence. And each of those 4 pillars then has different levels of resonance with different members of the C-suite. So, for example, the revenue evidence and the brand evidence are much more interested in the CEO. The revenue evidence or the customer evidence is much relevant to the CFO. And there's some VP of sales, for example, will want customer evidence and engagement evidence. So you've really got to map across all these different dimensions to provide the full picture. The problem that marketing so often has is we just focus on a very tactical, how has my campaign worked? But you're not really demonstrating the bigger picture about the value that marketing offers to the whole organization and why it's critical and why it can do things which other functions can't. So it was a great, there's more data underneath that, more mechanisms underneath about how you enact those different areas. But it was a great piece of work and really fascinating to be part of.
Yeah, I think what you share is very interesting. And the overall theme is that as marketers, we very much sometimes get caught up in our strategies and our campaigns and the results and how it did, but not articulating the value to different stakeholders that are relevant to them. And, the age-old one that we miss is sales, right? I spend a lot of time in this whole alignment of sales and marketing and that sort of thing. And I think there are so many times where the reason that sales leadership does not engage with marketing is that they don't really understand how it's directly applicable to them and their sellers. And so related to that, I'm interested from what you've seen, and I've been in this space for quite some time. I've seen examples of working really well and some examples of it not working really well. Have you seen an evolution of just in general organizations getting better at aligning sales and marketing? What have you seen, in the last 5, maybe even 10 years? Are we moving in the right direction? Is it pretty steady state? What are you seeing?
Jeff, I'd love to say that I've seen it just getting better all the time, but it would be a lie. It just seems to be a perennial problem. And I'll give you an example of that. We had a roundtable last week where we were bringing CMOs together to talk about challenges of building a great marketing team. And by the way, the interesting thing about that is when we envisaged the session back in the summer, it was all around recruiting. But then we started to promote it in November and oh, no one wants to talk about recruiting right now, funnily enough. So it was all about retaining and developing and optimizing. But besides that one, which is slightly depressing, but it's just the nature of where we are right now. And every situation has its own challenges and opportunities. But anyway, back to the point. One of the CMOs turned up and just kept hijacking the conversation in a nice way to talk about sales and marketing alignment. And we kept coming back to, oh my God, I want to get my team better, but the sales guys do this, and by the way, I'm sure that there's an equal and opposite view from salespeople going, but the marketing guys just don't get me. And it's still there. It's still,
of course,
it's still really ingrained. And it seems like the technology that we bring on board only serves to, technology we would think is going to be a panacea. This is going to make everything work, and we're going to live happily ever after together. But it just seems to kick the can down the road a bit further. And I think you expressed it brilliantly earlier on, and this came back in this meeting amongst many other things that we've done over the years. It's all about communication. It's all about dialogue. It's about humans getting together, understanding each other, and spending time with each other. It doesn't matter. You can have the best technology in the world. It will not replace that. And actually, if you try and use it to do that, it will only fail.
Yeah, this theme is kind of a double-edged sword for me. In one instance, it's good to hear that we are continuing to have this problem in the conversation, because I wouldn't be relevant if we had resolved it. And part of the reason that I do this work, I knew this was an ongoing problem that most organizations were not going to resolve, fix in a timely manner, right? And I would even argue potentially that this tension between sales and marketing will probably persist for most organizations for quite some time, right? And so that's why I've developed, Rev Engine. I'm doing this work. I'm partnering with folks like you that have really insightful points of view, because it is something that is really tough to change in the organization. And, I talked about in my book that there's truly two transformations that need to happen simultaneously, which is really tough. And so you have the actual innovation or transformation of the function itself. So the way that we do B2B marketing for the modern buyer, the way that we do B2B sales for the modern buyer are changing within themselves. So let's set that aside, because that in and of itself is challenging. And then we have to somehow come together and create this harmonious, seamless buying experience so that we can have a revenue engine that actually produces customers and revenue. And so those two things put on top of each other for leaders and organizations to do is really, really tough. And I cannot under communicate or over communicate, whatever the word is, that sales and marketing alignment should be taken very seriously, and not just saying we're going to align sales and marketing. It's going to happen next week or next quarter or next month. It can take years for us to get this right, because it's a lot of work. It's truly a business transformation.
And it's a moving target. You know what it looks like today. You know the customers, the shape of the business, the products, and how that plays out today. But that might be different in times where businesses are transforming all the time against different metrics. It's not a one and done, is it? It's a ongoing challenge, and personalities change and relationships change. All these dynamics feed into this challenge. So, I think there's two ways of looking at this. You say, Jeff, one is you go, oh, why haven't we got this sorted out yet? How come we're so rubbish in B2B? The other one is you say, this is a human system, and it depends on humans to work together, and we know we have to just keep working on it, and embrace that and work with it. And that's why people like you are just so fantastic in this industry, because you just get it all.
Well, thank you. And I agree with you 200%, because I'm glad that you talked about, we have a ton of great tech coming out, and we're seeing obviously a lot of consolidation on the sales side, but it doesn't start with the technology. And if you are starting with technology, you are doing it wrong. I said it, I'm going to continue to say it, because here's the thing. Technology will only accelerate a really bad system. It will not make the system better. It'll just make you bad faster, right? And so in order for us to, I tell people all the time and they laugh. I'm just like, no, I'm serious. If you have garbage, tech is just going to make it fall apart faster. It's not going to make it better. But I go back and, to my book where I talk about it is things like you said. We have to communicate across lines. We have to develop, we have to co-develop or co-create strategies that are focused on the buyer, the customer, and driving revenue. And if you don't do those things, the tech is not going to fix it. So again, we need to focus on that human element, communicating, making sure, marketing communicates its value to sales and vice versa. And then we can start to figure out what are the platforms we need. And not only just the platforms, but looking across MarTech and sales tech, because a lot of times, we might even get the strategies part right, but then we buy technology in silos. And then we wonder why they don't work together. Or if they work together, it's just they're redundant. And so that's a whole nother conversation for another podcast. But I'm glad you said what you said about really starting with that. It seems super simple, but just having a conversation about what do you need? What are your goals? How can I contribute to that? How can you help me? And that really is that shift that happens of getting us closer to being aligned and understanding what our counterparts need from us. So a great conversation as always. Thank you for helping us look forward into the future, hopefully get ahead of some things and be able to be nimble and quick, because a lot of us don't know what's coming at us. And my goal and my kind of focus is to help us be as prepared as possible for those B2B revenue leaders that are listening. So with that said, Joel, how can folks follow up with you, find you, stalk you, join the community? What are all those things that they can follow up after listening to the podcast, which I'm sure they will want to?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Joel Harrison, editor-in-chief of B2B Marketing. There's not that many Joel Harrisons on LinkedIn, so you can find me quite easily. I'm still on Twitter for now. That's a separate podcast, definitely.
That is definitely a separate podcast.
Let's not get started on that one now.
We'll have you back on in 6 months and we'll see what your opinion is. My God. Yeah. I'm not unpacking that.
No.
No.
But for the now, it's Joel_B2B editor. You can find me there. And or you can email me, joel.harrison@b2bmarketing.net. I'd love to talk to you and love to get, we have our Ignite event runs in, as we do a lot of conferences in the UK, but our Ignite events come to the US and Chicago in May 23, and very much hope you can join us there. And we'd love to see you and spread that globalized message of B2B and learn and cross-reference all those different ideas and creativity that's coming across the pond.
Love it. And then the website for Propolis, the community, what is it in case folks want to learn more about that?
If you go to b2bmarketing.net, and then I think it's probably /Propolis, or there's a website there. Propolis is a closed community, so you can't really go into the URL. You won't see anything. You'll just see a landing page. The best way to find out about it is either to message me or to go to b2bmarketing.net. And I think then /Propolis, or just find Propolis in the menu. And that will give you a lot of information about what it's about, what's there, how you can get involved, and all those kind of things. It's a very, very rich platform. And we really think this is the future of B2B marketing, just not only for us as a business and a brand, but also more generally for how the community, how the industry works together. It's this layer of, connectivity. So why not experience it for yourself, and then you can much better place to deploy it for your own marketing.
Love it. Well, Joel, great conversation as always, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Jeff. It's wonderful to talk to you.
You as well.
Thanks for listening to the Rev Engine podcast. I hope today's episode provided you with some actionable insights that will help you begin the process of transforming your organization to a high-performing revenue engine. If you found today's episode valuable, we ask that you support the show's growth in 3 ways. First, share the episode with your friends and colleagues. Second, follow me on social media @MeetJeffDavis on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. And finally, give us feedback on who you'd like to see on the show next. That's all for this episode. We look forward to having you join us next time, where we continue the conversation on how to build a high-performing revenue engine.